Good morning, class, and welcome to our virtual morning meeting for today. Today is Wednesday, April 15th. So we are right here. Now, today is a very special day in history, and a lot of exciting things happened on April 15th in the past. So we're going to go through a couple of the most exciting things that happened. In 1817, on April 15th, the first American school for the deaf opens in Hartford, Connecticut. Another exciting thing is that on April 15th of 1877, the first telephone was installed in Massachusetts. Another important event was that on April 15th of 1947, Jackie Robinson became the first African American to play in the U.S. Major League Baseball team, and he played for the Dodgers. And finally, my favorite was that on April 15th of 1955, Ray Kroc opened up the very first McDonald's fast food restaurant in Illinois. And today there's McDonald's all over the world. Now, a couple of famous people were also born on April 15th. One being Emma Watson, who is a famous movie actress, and she's turning 29 today. And Leonardo da Vinci was a famous painter who was born in 1452 and lived until 1519. He was also born on April 15th. So today is Wednesday. I want you to think about what day was yesterday if today was Wednesday. You can say it aloud to your screen. Awesome. Yesterday was Tuesday. So if today is Wednesday, what will tomorrow be? You can say it aloud now. Thursday. Awesome. Very good. Now let's jump on over to the weather and talk about what the weather is for today. So go ahead and look outside your window, or you can walk outside if it's okay with your parents, and think about what is the weather like today. Today in Ohio, where I'm staying, it is raining out. So there are clouds and rain coming down. But what is it like for where you're living? Do you see the sun out? Or is it windy? Maybe where you're living, it's storming out and you can see thunder and lightning and rain coming down. Or maybe it's partly cloudy where you can see both the sun and the clouds. It might be snowing, but like we talked about yesterday, it might not snow much more now that we're entering into spring. Or it could be rainy, just like where I'm living right now. Or maybe it's just a little cloudy. Okay, so go ahead and point to where the weather is like where you're from. Point to which picture. Okay, and then point on your thermometer, this special color thing right here, which talks about how hot or cold it is. How hot or cold is it where you are? Today for us, it's in the 50s, so it's kind of cool, kind of warm. You might need a jacket, all right? So that is the weather for today. Now we're going to read one of my all-time favorite stories today. It is called Extra Yarn by Mac Barnett. And I wanted to show you a picture of Matt Barnett. He is a young author who's living in California right now. And his book, the one that we're about to read, which is called Yarn, won the 2012 Boston Globe Horn Book Award and the 2013 E.B. White Read Aloud Award. So it is a very famous book written by Mac Barnett, and we get to read it today. So let's get started. And it's illustrated by John Klassen. So he is the one who drew all of the pictures for this book. On a cold afternoon in a cold little town, where everywhere you looked was either the white of snow or the black of soot from chimneys. Annabel found a box filled with yarn of every color. So she went home and knit herself a sweater. And when Annabelle was done, she had some extra yarn. So she knit a sweater for Mars too. But there was still extra yarn. And when Annabelle and Mars went for a walk, Nate pointed and laughed and said, "You two look ridiculous." "You're just jealous," said Annabelle. "No, I'm not," said Nate. But it turned out he was. And even after she'd made a sweater for Nate and his dog, and for herself and for Mars, she still had extra yarn. At school, Annabelle's classmates could not stop talking about her sweater. "Quiet!" shouted Mr. Norman. "Quiet, everyone! Annabelle, that sweater of yours is a terrible distraction. I cannot teach with everyone turning around to look at you." "Then I'll knit one for everyone," Annabelle said, "so they won't have to turn around." "Impossible," said Mr. Norman. "You can't." But it turned out she could, and she did, even for Mr. Norman. And when she was done, Annabelle still had extra yarn. So she knit sweaters for her mom and dad, and for Mr. Pendleton, and for Mrs. Pendleton, and for Dr. Palmer, and for little Louis. She made sweaters for everyone except Mr. Crabtree, who never wore sweaters, or even long pants, or who would stand in his shorts with the snow up to his knees. "No sweater for me, thanks," said Mr. Crabtree. So she made Mr. Crabtree a hat. And even then Annabelle still had extra yarn. She made sweaters for all the dogs and all the cats, and for other animals too. Soon people thought, "Soon Annabelle will run out of yarn." But it turned out she didn't. So Annabelle made sweaters for things that didn't even wear sweaters. Things began to change in that little town. News spread of this remarkable girl who never ran out of yarn, and people came to visit from around the world to see all the sweaters and to shake Annabelle's hand. One day an archduke who was very fond of clothes sailed across the sea and demanded to see Annabelle. "Little girl," said the archduke, "I would like to buy that miraculous box of yarn, and I am willing to offer you $1,000,000." "No, thank you," said Annabelle, who was knitting a sweater in a pickup truck. The archduke's mustache twitched. "2,000,000, he said. Annabelle shook her head. "No, thanks." "10,000,000, shouted the archduke. "Take it or leave it." "Leave it," said Annabelle. "I won't sell the yarn." And she didn't. So that night the archduke hired 3 robbers to break into Annabelle's house, and they stole the box. and took it to the Archduke, who set off across the snow and sailed over the sea back to his castle. The Archduke put on his favorite song and sat in his best chair. Then he took out the box and he lifted its lid and he looked inside. His mustache quivered. It shivered. It trembled. The Archduke hurled the box out the window and shouted, "Little girl, I curse you with my family's curse." You will never be happy again. But it turned out she was. And that is the end of our story, guys. That was Extra Yarn by Mac Barnett. And our question for the day is, if you had a magic box of extra yarn, what would you make a sweater for? Have a great day, guys, and happy learning.